you live in sweet country. That's
Good to see you.
right there. I'm gonna hide my bag right there. Yeah, I did.
You know what? And you know what? Before all this kicks off and these guys disappear, I want you to take a pic of me between Gabe and Ryan.
You want to do it right now?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, cool.
And you got to push that
Got it.
really hard.
Let's turn this way.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. Hey, Vanessa. Nice to meet you. How long have you been Zinke?
About a year now. It's an internship last summer.
Take it where you can get it. Yeah, I get it.
DC staff.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
How about you?
I run pretty large trail organizations across California, but then I do a bunch of work kind of like Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, mainly around things like understanding social gateway communities. So I work with
Then that,
around understanding what
that's basically
the trail
connects to the funder.
That's exactly what I had in mind, brother.
You know the game, Brad. I appreciate it.
every time.
But I have this.
Yeah, wear a lot of hats.
Hey,
Hunt when I can.
they get a picture of you, Andrew, fishing?
Oh, yeah. I need to get one.
Is that your deal?
That's not my deal, but
Oh, okay. All right.
it's hot.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I'm
Guess
supposed to
what?
speak, so I
I'll
don't
take that one.
Yeah, there you go.
That's better. Yeah. All right. Here, I'll trade you. Good trade. All right. Blocking people out.
I'm honored to have you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey.
You know what? I'm just going to say this is about let me get out of the way.
I got to leave right after. You will, man. Good doctor. How are you? Good. Thank you for being here.
You know what? They made an issue that there wasn't one.
Yeah.
And now it's an issue.
That's right. Oh, come on.
Here we go.
No, come on.
All of a sudden, the secretary had a lot
Will you go over the speaking order with them, and then we'll get started in about a minute?
Yeah, that sounds good. So Raul, we have 6 speakers. The last, it's okay, but it's all.
Secretary's authority.
We got.
But now you made it an issue.
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about. I think. 6.
Hey, how you doing?
Good day, guys.
How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Well, I think we're on the house, so there's a glass ceiling on how well we can be.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, no kidding, man. But no, I really appreciate you. People ask me now all the time. They're like, "What made Ryan want to do this?" But and I said because he's a good guy and he truly believes in the value of public lands. And when you grow up in these places, you can't get them out of who you are. And I think that's true for Montanans. It's true for New Mexicans.
And so we were given a great legacy by the great ones.
Yeah.
And that gift is to maintain and manage and preserve for the next generation.
Yeah.
And then there's challenges. We'll challenge the next generation. But I'll say, this is not a blue or a red. This is a red, white, blue.
Yeah.
And there's how do you get consensus? Is you work on common ground, and this is a common ground, and then from there you make it more meaningful.
Hey, absolutely. Good.
All right, perfect. You can go ahead and kick us off.
Hey,
Thanks for being here. Good.
it doesn't matter. All right,
All right,
so
Who's going to kick it off?
I'm going to kick it off, and
Great.
then we're going to have an invocation from Reverend Black here, who's going to kick us off today. I'll pass it off to Mr. Zinke, and then to Mr. Simpson. Debbie Dingle should be around here somewhere.
You wanna wait for Debbie?
After then Zinke will say a few words, then I'll say a couple words. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Debbie
Yes,
Dingle,
it'll be
she's
after.
here, and
Yep.
then Troy.
And then Troy. So the list will be here, and you can introduce the next speaker if you'd like, or I'm happy to do that as well. Whatever you do.
I'll introduce Mike.
Okay.
Just introduce me.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'll just hand it back to you, or what do I do?
you want to, you know what? Hand it back to Gabe.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you. All right. I'm not sure. Let's get started. Is Debbie on her way? Okay, Debbie's on her way. Okay, all right.
That way we have 3 and 3. By the time we get to her, she should be here.
Okay.
She is a force.
All right.
Here we go.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Gabe Vasquez. I proudly represent the 2nd District of New Mexico. Thank you all for joining us for this very important announcement for a bipartisan initiative that brings us together as Americans and as lawmakers from different states and different walks of life. Before we hear from our congressional champions of this caucus, I'd like to introduce Reverend Andrew Black, who will deliver an invocation to remind us of why we're here today. Reverend Black is a minister at First Presbyterian Church in Santa Fe. He's an avid fly fisherman. He's the founder of Earthkeepers 360. He's the grandson of 2 World War II veterans, and he runs the Veterans for Public Lands program, where he reconnects veterans with nature and promotes healing through fly fishing, backcountry hiking, and camping on America's public lands. Reverend Black, thank you for sharing your prayer with us today. Come on up.
Well, good morning. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you all here this morning. Please join with me in prayer. Creator God, from the east and the west to the north and the south, you have called these leaders to gather on this common ground so that they may indeed find common ground and common purpose in serving the people of this great nation. I pray that you watch over all who represent the people of America. May they serve with energy, intelligence, and imagination. Make strong in their hearts what unites them. Build bridges across what divides them. May those with a voice help the voiceless. May those with power help the powerless. And may all who enter this Capitol be treated with great dignity, respect, and kindness. O great Spirit who gives us all life, you have blessed America with a rich and diverse tapestry of history, culture, and sacred traditions that are rooted in your land. We give you thanks for the sound of elk bugling in Glacier National Park. Revel at the beauty of bighorn sheep scaling the cliffs of the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. Are stunned by the splendor of wildflowers at Kastner Range, and are humbled by the hawks soaring high above Oak Flat in the Grand Canyon. God of all creation, we marvel at the magnificence of Idaho's cutthroat trout and stand in awe of mountain goats scaling the mighty cliffs of the Rocky Mountain National Park. Our hearts are filled with wonder at the majesty of the eagle soaring above Oregon Mountain's Desert Peaks National Monument, and our minds are in awe at the silent flight of the great horned owl over Chuckwalla. We are humbled in the shadow of the sheer snow peaks of the Olympic Range, and our souls find refuge in the sacred silence of the sun setting over the boundary waters of Minnesota. Good and gracious God, help us to remember that we are all keepers of this beautiful and sacred place. Make us strong stewards of a land blessed by so much enchantment, and let us look to the common good as we address the challenges of your creation, so that we may develop responsible policies and practices toward your land, your water, and your wildlife. Holy One, on this day, we pray for all who serve as active military, and we honor our veterans who fought not just to protect our communities and country, but also fought to protect our public lands that serve as a source of healing, wholeness, unity, and community for so many in our country. For all these things, we humbly pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for that, Reverend. Today, we're proud to announce the formation of the Bipartisan Public Lands Caucus, an effort meant to reinforce the importance of maintaining the integrity of public lands, public access, land management, and conservation in the U.S. Congress. My family's roots in conservation run deep, and it's a story that started with my grandfather, who taught me early on about the lessons of conservation. Growing up fishing New Mexico's rivers and hunting with my father and grandfather taught me early on about these values, about our culture, about responsible stewardship of our lands, water, and wildlife. That was only possible because with very little money in our pockets, we could travel across southern New Mexico in an old Ford Econoline van and enjoy the same experiences as families that were better off. Make no mistake, our public lands are this nation's great equalizer. on the water, on the land, or in the backcountry, we all benefit equally from the foundations laid by great conservation leaders like Aldo Leopold and Teddy Roosevelt. Public lands and public access to our forests, rivers, grasslands, and deserts are a unique American experience that we must continue to fight for and that we cannot take for granted. They also help support a multi-billion-dollar industry, an outdoor recreation that powers rural communities, connects Americans to their history and to their heritage, and allows us to pass on our traditions to the next generation. In my district, that includes access to cultural sites for 7 Native American tribes. My district is also home to 4 national forests, 2 national parks, our nation's first designated wilderness, and spectacular national monuments like Organ Mountain's Desert Peaks. And that's why I'm here, to help us bring both sides of the aisle together to protect what we hold dear, and that's why I'm leading this effort with my caucus co-chair, Representative Ryan Zinke from the great state of Montana. Now, just recently, we introduced the Bipartisan Public Lands and Public Hands Act, which prevents the wholesale or transfer of public lands to private entities. And working with our colleagues, not just in the West, but across the nation, we will use this caucus as a platform to discuss future legislation, public lands resource management, administrative actions, and other issues on which we collectively agree. Not as Republicans or as Democrats, but as Americans who understand the importance of the value of the special places that we are privileged to represent. This will be a working caucus meant to bring us together that we will grow over the coming months and years. I'd like to now call up our caucus co-chair, my friend, and someone who's no stranger to the management of our nation's federal lands, Representative Ryan Zinke from the great state of Montana.
Well, first of all, great to be with you, and thank you for members here. You know, our public lands is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's an American issue, and we should use it in that context of being red, white, and blue. You know, those of us in the West, I think we recognize that much of the West we inherited from the great ones, from Teddy Roosevelt, Pinchot, Muir, and others. And it's our responsibility to make sure we maintain those and manage them in the future. You know, when I grew up in Montana, things were a little different. There wasn't as much population out there. There wasn't as many fence lines. And public access was as whatever direction you went. But today, much of the West is a lot different. There are more fence lines. We have challenges on public access. We have challenges on urban sprawl. We are mismanaging our forests a lot of times. And it's important that we talk about better management to preserve and defend why we live in the West and why America's greatest idea should be preserved and defended. And again, this is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. And I think it's important this caucus talks about the issues that are hard. You know, how do we manage our forests better? Do we really have to burn them down every season? How do we manage our watersheds? Do we really have to put at risk our watersheds by infiltration of clays from forests? How do we manage our wildlife corridors? Because wildlife becomes fractionated. Wildlife just doesn't stay in public lands or private lands. It goes back and forth. And how do we better manage our wildlife corridors and flyways so we can ask and depend on us as do our part, but also ensure the next generation has the same opportunity that we did to enjoy what I think are our greatest treasures. And I'm honored to have my chair, Mike Simpson from the great state of Idaho, a man with enormous experience. He sits on appropriations and interior, and a man that shares a love and passion for the great outdoors. And of course, Debbie Dingell, who has been my friend for a long time. But these are people that are serious legislators. It isn't their first rodeo. They understand how the process works, and they have a lot of influences within our caucuses to get things done. So with that, I'd like Mike Simpson from the great state of Idaho to say a few words. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Vasquez and Congressman Zinke, for putting together this caucus and introducing the legislation, Public Lands in Public Hands.
I come from the state of Idaho. We have the third highest percentage of our land is public lands, I think, of any state. I think Alaska's first, then probably Nevada. We have about 60 to 64%. It's actually 64% of the state of Idaho is in public lands. We often complain about the management of those public lands, whether it's the BLM or the Forest Service or the Park Service or Fish and Wildlife. But you know what? Idahoans love our public lands. It would be a mistake to presume that Idahoans would like to see these lands turned over or taken out of public hands and sold off. Idahoans love their public lands. That's why I live in Idaho. We like to go fishing and hunting and not have to ask anybody for access across their property to get to that favorite fishing hole or hunting place. So that's why I'm here, and I've spent a career trying to make sure that Idahoans and others, particularly in the West where there's most of the public lands, have access to those public lands for multiple use, and that we can use them for the way that they were intended. And it's our job to make sure that access still exists, and it's our job to make sure that those agencies that oversee these public lands, whether it's Forest Service or BLM, are acting as good neighbors, and that they are listening to the local communities and addressing the needs in the forests and sagebrush lands and other places in Idaho. So this is just common sense is what I look at it as. So, and I think an overwhelming majority of Idahoans and people across this country don't want to be selling off our public lands. So I guess I'm supposed to introduce, who's next?
Let's go, Troy.
Troy? You're up.
Well, let me introduce, because I'm Montana 1, I'll introduce our Montana 2. For those that don't know Troy Downing, he's a combat veteran, Air Force. He's the newest member. We're 1 and 2, Mutt and Jeff kind of in Montana. But you can't find a guy that loves the public lands more than he. He's a hunter, he's a fisherman, and all around a great guy. So with that, the newest member of Montana 2, Troy Downing.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. And just to show how important this is to Montana, you right here have 100% of the Montana House delegation standing up for this. So, yeah, we get 2 whole seats. Troy Downing, I'm really happy to be here. Just a little bit of background. Before I got into Congress, I was a Montana land commissioner. And we managed about 5.5 million acres of state land. And really the mantra of multiple use and sustained yield was something that we managed that by. Sustained yield, meaning that asset is there, that treasure is there for the next generation, the one after that. You manage that so that you've still got that forever. I'm going to say in Montana, public land access, hiking, hunting, fishing is incredibly important to us. You could say it's in our veins, making sure that we are being stewards of these incredible assets. But that's not just Montana. That's not just the western states. It's not a partisan issue. I don't care what side of the aisle you come from, or if you come from neither side of the aisle. You care about this. You understand. You recognize that this is a treasure, and we need to make sure that we continue to provide access, that we continue to manage, that we continue to come together to find solutions to make sure that these treasures are there for the next generation, the one after that, the one after that. So I'm really happy to join my colleagues here on this caucus to make sure that we are working together and multiplying our voice in protecting public lands, protecting access to public lands, everything that's so meaningful to the culture of my state, to the culture of western states, and to the culture of this country. So I'm proud to be here. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to my colleagues for being part of this. And I believe I'm handing this back to Congressman Vasquez.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. These are some of our founding members of our Public Lands Caucus, and we couldn't do this without the great support of somebody whose legacy precedes them, and somebody who worked so hard on this issue, along with the late Congressman Dingle, to pass one of the most transformational conservation pieces of legislation in the U.S. Congress. So I'm proud that one of our vice chairs is Mrs. Debbie Dingle from Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to tell you what an honor it is to be here with all of my friends to launch the bipartisan Public Lands Caucus, because these lands belong to everybody. And what we need to be doing is creating more access, protecting all of them. My good friend Ron Zinke, who we came in the same class. He detoured and came back. And he actually had the one other job that John Dingell said if he ever had another job being what he had, it would have been Secretary of Interior. It's true, because he loved it, because he knew the importance of protecting these lands. And when we talk about the West, and there was nothing that would make him happier than to be going to any one of your states. You know, he loved them all. But we also need to remember that it's not just out in these big, wide states, but we have a wildlife refuge. We have wildlife refuges throughout this country. We've got the first international wildlife refuge, which preserves the last undeveloped mile of the Detroit River. And we have over 300 species of birds and Lord knows how many fish. And this is what our responsibility is across the country, is for the next generations to be protecting our great outdoors and encouraging more people to be able to enjoy them, participate them, teach the young people about the importance of our great outdoors. And we need to be investing in them, and we need to be protecting the species of all kinds that we hunt, fish, or it's a monarch butterfly. I just look for them every year, and we're losing them. So I'm very excited to be working with everyone here, and we will do our best to protect our public lands for all Americans. They don't belong to corporations. And now do I do my dear friend from California? Yeah. I sit next to him on energy and commerce, but I know he's a doctor but loves the outdoors, a conservationist. Let me introduce Dr. Raul Ruiz from California.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you to Representative Zinke and Gabe Vasquez, the two co-chairs of this bipartisan public lands caucus. It's such a great idea. It's much needed and way overdue. I'm Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz, and I have the honor of representing California's 25th Congressional District, home to the Joshua Tree National Park and the newly designated Chuckwalla National Monument, and some of the most breathtaking landscapes in the country. In fact, our valley, in the Coachella Valley where I grew up in, is surrounded by public lands. You have Joshua Tree National Park in the north. In the northeast, you have Sand of Snow. In the south, you have the Santa Rosa Mountains National Monument. And now in the east, we have the Chuckwalla National Monument. And growing up in the Coachella Valley, surrounded by incredible landscapes, many of which are protected public lands, I know just how sacred those lands are and how crucial it is that we continue to protect them. They are more than just beautiful places. They are part of our identity, part of our history, part of our culture, and we also know they're part of our health, because the environmental health is closely linked to our public's health. And that is why I fight every day as a physician, as a father, a husband, and as a congressman now, to protect them. Conserving public lands is about honoring the land's deep cultural and spiritual roots, especially for the indigenous communities who have stewarded it for generations. It is about preserving critical ecosystems and wildlife habitats, and it's about ensuring that every child, no matter where they live, can grow up with access to the healing power of nature. Public lands are also where health and recreation intersect. You see, at public lands, you have clean air to breathe. You have a safe place to play and camp. You have health while you're hiking, and you have mental health benefits from even a short walk on a trail. These are fundamental basic needs. But too many communities, particularly in underserved and rural areas, are left out without access to these locations. That is why expanding and protecting outdoor recreation is so important. Whether you are a veteran seeking peace on a desert hike, a child seeing the stars for the first time, or a family gathering under the cottonwoods, these moments should belong to everyone. There has been studies with veterans who suffer from PTSD that if you combine the outdoor recreation hikes and campings with behavioral or mental health and medication, they have better outcomes than if they only do mental health therapy with medication. So there is a definite healing power to the outdoors for our veterans and many people who suffer from anxiety and other mental health illnesses. So in California's 25th, I'm proud to represent not just the Joshua Tree National Park, but now the Chuckwalla National Monument, a hard-fought win led by local voices, tribal leaders, veterans, environmental advocates, and everyday people who love this land. As a member of the Public Lands Caucus, I will continue working across the aisle to conserve our landscapes, expand public access, and ensure that our public lands are protected, not just in name, but in practice. Because when we conserve our public lands, we protect our culture, our health, our environment, and our future. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of the sponsoring organizations that have joined us here today. We have a wide variety of advocates that are joining us here today from across the country to help support this caucus that will also help be voices and advocates as we have these discussions and conversations. I also want to thank all of the colleagues who have joined us, those that aren't here today as the caucus continues to grow, and of course our staffs. I want to thank particularly Emily. I want to thank Laura. I want to thank Valeria and Mariana for helping us put this together because they put a lot of work into it. So with that, we can take some questions. I think we got about 10 minutes for questions. So, and if you have a particular question to anybody, please let us know.
If it's a hard question, ask Troy.
Yeah.
Oh. Representative Zinke, you talked about this should not be about, you should be able to talk about some of the hard issues.
Yeah.
While you're all talking about how public lands aren't a partisan issue, there are partisan issues that are kind of dividing. One of them would be opening public lands more to illegal mining. How do you guys plan to deal with some of those tougher issues?
Well, we live in a partisan world, but there is common ground. And I found as a commander, how do you address the hard stuff? You look at common ground and you gain relationships and you talk about the easy ones. And then you go to the more difficult ones and make sure there's trust. Our public lands, myself, I'm kind of a Teddy Roosevelt guy, multiple use, pin show, that's greatest good, longest term, best science, best use. That includes mining, that includes full range of spectrum. I'm also a Boy Scout. If you're going to mine or do something that's disturbing on the public land, then, make sure your campfire is in good or better condition than you leave it. And a lot of that is using good science. But there's a lot of common ground in the challenges of how to manage in the future. A lot of it's public access. When all of a sudden lines between private and public property gets a little blurred, most of us out west use Onyx, great program, but I think we can do better than Onyx in finding public access and a lot of times improving public access. Wyoming's got a challenge now with corners, and I will say, if there's a piece of public land out there, it might not be the corner, because when they drew it, that corner might be over a cliff. So there's some way to get in that property, and that's working with this caucus and also working with landowners. As an example of conflict, you have wildlife corridors. Turns out that a lot of the fence lines don't accommodate sheep. A bear will go through them and an elk will jump over them, but a sheep will go around 40 or 50 miles. So it's working with this caucus to look at providing some help and some technology and some technical assistance on our fence lines and some resources available. So we look at where the corridors are. We see around the west a lot more overpasses are showing up for wildlife movement. That's a good thing. It didn't happen by chance. It's happened by looking at science, where we need to make adjustments. And I'm honored because we can have discussions. And, the press loves to create a conflict about every issue. When we get together, sometimes over a beer, there's a lot less conflict. But we focus on putting legislation within our Congress to get things done. and to make a difference. We wouldn't, our time is precious. We wouldn't do this if we didn't think we could get things done. So
that's right. Yes, sir.
Josh, with Politico. Yeah, I mean, I know this is a long conservative caucus, but there is an immediate issue. Just wanted to ask you about the Republicans on this amendment from Congressman Amadai and Malloy yesterday to the Natural Resources Committee markup on reconciliation that would sell small tracts of public land in their states, Nevada and Utah, as revenue to help with housing. What do you all think about that?
Well, as secretary, the secretary has the authority to adjust property. We do that with SNPLMA. It's a terrible acronym, but that's out of Las Vegas. Best use. Some of the areas, as secretary did it in New Mexico with a school, needed a piece of property. There's disassociated piece of properties on land trades. So the secretary has a lot of authority to do it. Concern is when it becomes, I would say, not in the public interest or not in the public process. There's a public process to it. And out west, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of times with mismanagement. A lot of communities are drying up because they're looking to public land next door, and they can't use it. They can't log it. They can't extract minerals. A lot of times they can't even go in it. So there's a lot of frustration out in the West. I understand that, but I'd prefer the management scheme. And I give an example as a hotel. If you don't like the management of a hotel, don't sell the hotel. Change the management. So that's kind of where I sit on that position. Other people might have a different position, but this caucus is not about a single issue. Although this is the issue at the moment. Yesterday it was about water in the West. Where is St. George going to get the water? And calling rights, and I'm sure as we go forward, there's going to be the next issue that we should discuss and look at a consensus on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. You be able to answer as well, then?
Yeah, I'm going to underscore some of the things that Congressman Zinke said. But in a lot of this, like what we did as a land commissioner, I mentioned we have about 5.5 million acres of state land in Montana. We've got, according to the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, about 30 million acres of public land total. And going back to that, multiple use sustained yield, just making sure that we're being very thoughtful with our colleagues on both sides here on where we can find consensus, where we can find reality. And so a lot of times you come up with things like, should we have an open pit mine at the entrance to Yellowstone Park? I think we all agree no. But finding other places where we can have the minimum impact, like Congressman Zinke said, on the science, on consensus, where does this make sense, and how can you still continue to do that multiple use? Like the land that we managed in Montana. Some of it was timber stand management, but we also, worked with mountain bike groups to have trails in there. We tried to find different ways of really making that multiple use, making sure we're not depleting the asset. So I have not looked at the Amadei's markup yet, but I appreciate you bringing that up. But I do believe that this group has the best intentions of making sure that we are preserving these treasures, using the science, making sure we can find consensus on what's right and what's wrong to do where.
Time for one more question.
I want to just say one thing. I think that all of us here want to work together. We want to talk to each other. I think all of us here are very committed to working together on public lands. And they talked about public processes, getting all of the... I'm somebody who always brings all the stakeholders together, tries to find that common ground. I would urge all of us as we do things that their hearings, it's not done in the dead of night, and that we have good bipartisan discussions with everybody impacted at the table.
Okay. One more question. Yes, sir.
Cameo for Desert News. This is a follow-up. So if that amendment included the full reconciliation package for the Republicans on this caucus, does that make it more difficult to support the full package if it does include the public land sales? I think we're just going to focus on the caucus.
Okay. With that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great answer.
Yeah.